The last time Airbus made a major announcement was during the announcement of the end of the Airbus A380 program in February 2019, marking the end of a nightmare program for the European plane maker that ended up being a $25 billion loss venture. Since then, aviation lovers and analysts alike have been curious to see what the company has been working on to reaffirm its dominance in the long-haul high-capacity commercial aviation niche. And now, Airbus has finally eased the curiosity after announcing an audacious plan to build an aircraft poised to fill the gap left by the superjumbo. Even more shocking? Airbus plans to kill two birds with this one stone by also providing a fierce competitor to the 787-10 Dreamliner as well as the new 777X. Now, what is the A390 all about? And is the industry really ready for this aircraft, or will it end up being just another expensive but failed gamble by Airbus? Time to lay everything bare. But before we even get to the point where we look into what the all-new Airbus A390 is all about, we first need to understand why Airbus's decision to go down this route has been long overdue. To do that, we must go back to the late 2000s when the European plane maker managed to launch the Airbus A380 superjumbo into commercial service. Initially, Airbus envisioned the A380 to compete with the Boeing 747 and to also redefine commercial aviation by easing the need for airliners to acquire many smaller wide-body airliners for long-haul flights. However, as soon as the A380 entered the market, it slowly started dawning on Airbus that this program would potentially be a white elephant, and all the red flags were there for everyone to see. First, the A380 was a gigantic aircraft, and that created problems right from the start. Its wingspan of 262 feet and a maximum takeoff weight of an astounding 1.27 million pounds meant it could only operate from a limited number of airports worldwide. In fact, among those that could handle it, a good number needed to carry out a few more modifications and update their infrastructure just to comfortably handle the aircraft. Some of these modifications included costly modifications such as reinforced taxiways, wider runways, and double boarding bridges just to accommodate the aircraft. As such, at its peak, only around 140 airports were fully certified to handle it. This meant that airlines that had taken ownership of the aircraft were faced with major challenges pertaining to route planning and overall fleet management. That lack of flexibility quickly turned into a major weakness and only set the ground for the downward spiral of the A380 program. The cost of running the A380 was another issue, and it quickly became a major problem for airlines. The jet was powered by 4 high-bypass turbofan engines, either the Rolls-Royce Trent 900 or the Engine Alliance GP 7200, and both consumed far more fuel than the new generation twin-engine widebodies that soon followed. On a long-haul sector, the A380 could burn more than 0 gallons of jet-owned fuel every flight hour. By comparison, the Airbus A350 that entered commercial service about 7 years later averaged around 700 gallons per hour, and the Boeing 787 around 900 gallons. That fuel flow gap alone translated into thousands of dollars saved with every block hour. When you put a dollar figure on it, the contrast becomes even sharper. Direct operating cost for the A380 has been estimated to range between $25 and $35 per flight hour. Now, compare that with the A350, which comes in at under $10 per hour, while the 787 sits in the low to mid-teens depending on the variant and configuration. Not to forget that the A380 needed very high load factors to even reach break-even. This meant that if it was not operating close to maximum payload, about 80%, it could be up to a quarter less efficient per revenue passenger kilometer than its rivals. This shortcoming left carriers struggling to make the business case for it, and with that, shying away from adding it to their fleets. Then there was the matter of timing. You see, Airbus designed the A380 with the hub and spoke operational model in mind, plainly since this is the model that dominated the airline industry in the 1990s. This model allowed airlines to use smaller narrow-body airliners to funnel passengers into large designated hubs and then fly them to their long-haul destinations on a handful of huge aircraft. However, in the mid-2000s, these carriers started doing away with this model and adopting the point-to-point model where they overlooked the major hubs and instead flew direct from one location to the final destination. By the time the A380 was entering commercial service in 2007, it was clear that the end of the hub and spoke model that the A380 was built for was nigh. This meant that many carriers preferred acquiring smaller wide-body airliners, such as the Boeing 787 and the Airbus A350, as they were more suited to the new operational model. Moreover, considering the fact that many passengers also preferred the convenience of avoiding layovers, the A380 found itself being more of an obsolete machine before it even reached its peak. It turns out that even Boeing, Airbus's largest competitor in the industry, had foreseen the unfeasibility of this program earlier on and even warned them about it. At the 2017 Paris Air Show, Boeing's then marketing chief, Randy Tinseth, said the backlog would never be delivered because the jet was simply too big for the market. He further stated that the market was slowly morphing and adopting a model that would straight out push the A380 out into the cold. Industry analysts further pointed out as early as the mid-2000s that new twin-engine wide-bodies would soon outclass the four-engine design in fuel burn and flexibility. In fact, Boeing itself was already angling to dominate the market by launching the 787 Dreamliner program, a smaller wide-body airliner that was more agile, fuel and cost-efficient, and overall better aligned with the changing industry dynamics. Boeing even went further and reminded Airbus that chasing state aid for upgrades like the proposed A380neo could run into legal trouble under trade rules. In simple terms, the warnings were clear. However, Airbus was adamant. It had to push ahead to get that aircraft that would compete effectively with the 747. In the end of it all, history proved Boeing right. In the end, the A380 became a major market failure for Airbus, with the company managing to sell only 251 units, a far distance from the 750 units it had originally hoped to produce and deliver to airlines. Speaking about the decision to pull the plug on the program, the then Airbus's chief executive, Tom Enders, was quoted saying, "It's a painful decision. We have invested a lot of effort, a lot of resources, and a lot of sweat into this aircraft. But obviously, we need to be realistic." It was evident that Airbus had admitted that the A380 was a wrong aircraft, built at the wrong time. Since then, the European aircraft manufacturer has been largely disadvantaged in the long-haul wide-body niche. This is because its product line in this division only has the two variants of the Airbus A350, the 900 and the 1000 variant. On the other hand, Boeing boasts the three Dreamliner variants as well, the more popular 777-300ER and the soon-to-be launched 777X. It's clear that for Airbus to compete effectively here, it ought to launch at least one wide-body program and put Boeing's dominance in check. Now, after more than half a decade since the planemaker announced an end to the A380 program, it has dropped a bombshell. That much-awaited aircraft is in the works. Enter the Airbus A390. The plane that Airbus is betting on to help cover the gap left by the A380, and more importantly, to enable it compete squarely with Boeing and offer the market an alternative to the existing options currently in the market. Initially, Airbus had remained tight-lipped concerning the specific details of the A390, and this led to many people coming up with multiple theories concerning its specifications. For instance, there is a faction that argued that Airbus was considering going a notch higher than what it did with the A380 and add one more deck to make them three. However, this theory was quickly dismissed, as analysts argued that doing this would simply mean that Airbus did not learn its lesson following the collapse of the A380 program. The rationale behind this is that adding another deck would only add to the weight of the aircraft, meaning that it would only carry a relatively small load before clocking its maximum takeoff weight. Moreover, more weight meant a need for more engines to generate sufficient power, and with that, increased fuel consumption and overall costly operations. The sheer size of a three-deck jetliner would also position Airbus in the same pitfall it was with the A380 concerning limited airport access. And with that, it was clear that Airbus would not dare go down that route again. However, details are now starting to emerge concerning what the A390 will look like. For starters, it is confirmed that Airbus has gone with the classic single-deck design. The planemaker has chosen this layout to directly address the size factor that crippled the market reach of the defunct A380 program. With a more conventional single-deck fuselage, the A390 will be able to access a much wider range of airports without requiring expensive modifications to gates, taxiways, or runways. With this design approach, Airbus is almost certain that the jet will be more attractive to carriers by virtue of ascertaining better agility in route planning and smoother fleet management. Simply put, airlines taking ownership of the new jet will not be locked into a handful of mega hubs. Instead, they will be able to rotate the aircraft across a broader mix of city pairs, an aspect that improves asset utilization and makes it easier to chase demand where it exists. In short, Airbus is set to ensure that the A390 is able to combine the capacity airlines still value with the operational freedom the A380 never truly delivered. In addition to that, it is also confirmed that the A390 will be built to carry between 450 and 470 passengers in a standard two-class cabin. However, the specific number of passengers will be dependent on how each airline outfits its interior. To get a better understanding of what this means, we need to look at another aircraft that will be competing with the A390, the Boeing 777X. In a typical two-class layout, this aircraft is expected to seat roughly 395 to 426. At this point, the difference in the number of seats between these two aircraft may seem modest. However, looking at it from the perspective of long-haul operations, that difference starts to make a whole lot of sense. Look at it this way. Data in the public domain has shown that the 777-9 variant of the 777X burns about 2,600 gallons of jet fuel per hour in cruise, while carrying around 426 passengers. That gives it a fuel per seat efficiency much better than many older wide-bodies, though still under pressure from new designs. Suppose the A390 can match similar cruise performance while carrying 450 to 470 passengers. The fuel burn per seat will drop further, simply because fixed costs get divided among more packs. Those extra seats offered by the European aircraft will translate into stronger revenue on high-yield sectors. More paying passengers help offset fuel burn, crew cost, airport fees, maintenance, repairs, and other costs incurred in making sure that an aircraft operates optimally. More importantly, this will translate to the significant improvements in fuel per seat efficiency, an aspect that will help airlines battle rising fuel prices. Suppose Airbus manages to keep operating costs per flight hour competitive. It goes without saying that the A390 will undoubtedly offer carriers a compelling path to higher yield without the need to fly more sectors. Let's now shift gears and talk about range, because this is where the A390 could give Airbus a significant competitive edge in the long-haul wide-body niche. According to reports, the jet is projected to push up to 10.0 miles, positioning it firmly within the ultra-long-haul category. For carriers, this could be music to the ears, as it simply means fewer payload restrictions and more flexibility on demanding stage lengths. Take Qantas, for example. With the A390 in its fleet, the Australian flag carrier could easily handle London to Perth with more seats and fewer compromises on cargo. On the other hand, a carrier like Japan Airlines could plan Tokyo to Buenos Aires non-stop without the need to make a refueling stopover midway through the flight. Airlines like Singapore could open even longer non-stop services to the United States. Chilean flag carrier LATAM could also be better positioned to link Santiago directly with Southeast Asia, further connecting Chile to the rest of the world. Now, put these impressive numbers beside the new Boeing 777X. The longer 777-9 variant offers about 7,200 nautical miles. On the other hand, the smaller sibling, the 777-8, stretches to around 8,700 nautical miles. Now, although both of these American jets are strong performers, the A390 still pushes past them and gives airlines a strong reason why they need to add it to their fleets. Key to note is that extra reach widens ETOPS planning options, reduces crew swaps, and trims ground handling costs from intermediate stops. Here, experts and analysts have agreed on one thing. If Airbus delivers on this range promise, the A390 will be hard to ignore. Let us now look at another detail that might turn out to be either a make or break for the new A390, and that is the engine. In this front, Airbus seems to have learned its lesson with the A380 and is keen not to repeat those same mistakes. As a result, the planemaker is keeping its options wide open for the A390. It is alleged that the company is already negotiating with the British aircraft engine manufacturer, Rolls-Royce, about the possibility of going with the Ultrafan, Rolls-Royce's latest high-bypass geared turbofan that has been in development for over a decade. According to the engine maker, the engine could deliver around 10% better fuel burn than the Trent XWB, which is already one of the most efficient aircraft engines in active service today. If that holds true, the A390 could give airlines serious fuel savings while also positioning the European aircraft manufacturer as a significant contributor toward the industry's attainment of net zero emissions by 2050. However, Airbus has also adopted a cautious approach and seems to have avoided putting all its eggs in one basket. Since the A390 is expected to have thrust requirements in the same range as the A350-1000, it is very possible that Airbus could also offer the Trent XWB-97 as an engine option. That would be a smart move, as it would also attract carriers operating the A350-1000, as they will be guaranteed fleet commonality, We are talking about the likes of Ethiopian, Qatar, and British Airways. For these carriers, the ease of slotting the A390 into the same maintenance and training pool as the A350-1000 aircraft in their fleets would save them both time and money, a factor that would further convince them to consider placing orders for the new aircraft. Airbus is also leaving the door open for the future. Its Zero-E program is still pushing hydrogen and fuel cell electric propulsion. In this program, Airbus is exploring the possibility of replacing the traditional fossil fuels with an electric propeller that will be powered by hydrogen cells that transform the hydrogen into electricity through a series of chemical reactions. In essence, if Airbus can package the stated efficiency of the UltraFan or the commonality of the XWB-97, while still keeping an eye on hydrogen power in the years to come, the A390 could be a very attractive proposition for carriers looking to balance performance, sustainability, and long-term fleet strategy. Now, all these specs might sound good on paper. The real question remains, is the A390 a good fit for the modern commercial aviation industry? To answer that question, we need to consider a few factors. The first being demand for passenger travel, and that calls for us to look at the data. In the last few years post-pandemic, air travel demand has been climbing steadily. In 2024 alone, global passenger traffic grew by more than 6% compared with the previous year. In addition to that, forecasts into the next decade point to annual growth of around 5% in revenue passenger kilometers. A clear point that as time passes, more people are preferring to travel by air than by other means. To get a better understanding of this point, we can look at a few examples, starting with India. In this country, domestic passenger traffic rose by about 6.12% in 2024, reaching 161.3 million flyers on domestic routes. The country's total air passenger count hit 241 million in that year, up roughly 11.1% over 2023. Turning to China, its civil aviation market recorded around 730 million passenger trips in 2024, an increase of about 18% year over year. The domestic segment alone logged about 640 million trips, showing strong growth compared to 2019. In fact, in China, airlines are adding routes between major hubs and secondary cities as more people continue to fly. One example is the rise in international traffic to and from Southeast Asia and Europe. Another is expansion of domestic linkages across provinces to support tourism and business travel. As such, it goes without saying that in the next few years, many carriers across the world, especially those in regions across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and North America, will need more high-capacity carriers to cater to this demand. And what better time for Airbus to front the A390 than this? Another factor to consider in determining whether the A390 is a good fit for the industry is Airbus's current order backlog. The thing is, with the demand characterizing the industry at the moment, carriers are looking to take deliveries of the ordered aircraft as soon as possible and cannot afford to wait years for deliveries. As a matter of fact, this is the reason why airlines like Emirates have been so furious with Boeing over repeated delays in the delivery of the 777X. Emirates President Tim Clark has even admitted that the airline has been forced to part with a whopping $3 billion into retrofitting its older Boeing 777 aircraft just to keep them flying while it waits for the new 777X. The retrofit program has since expanded to more than 220 aircraft, and the bill is now closer to $5 billion. That is money the airline never wanted to spend and could have redirected into other operational aspects to enhance its competitiveness. Similarly, Cathay Pacific has faced the same problem as it has been forced to keep wide bodies in service longer than planned and to spend millions of dollars upgrading cabins and maintaining older airframes because of Boeing's late deliveries. Now, all of these point to one thing: when manufacturers cannot deliver on time, airlines end up bleeding cash just to bridge the gap. So, if Airbus can get the A390 into service on schedule, it could instantly win favor with carriers desperate to avoid those kinds of delays and the costs associated with them. We cannot forget to consider the money side of things, because that's also a significant factor that airlines really pay attention to. However, at this point, we have to work with hypotheticals, since Airbus is yet to reveal what the A390 will cost. We can do that by looking at the A350-1000, which is the closest aircraft to the A390 in Airbus's lineup. The A350-1000 variant lists at around $366.5 million. Based on that, it is possible to gauge that A390 might go for about $400 million due to its larger size, upgraded avionics, new composite structures, and a higher capacity cabin. Now, compare that with the Boeing 777X, which sits at about $442 million. On paper, the 777X is more expensive, yet the A390 could actually deliver a better deal. Why? Because it promises more fuel efficiency that translates into millions of dollars in annual savings for a long-haul fleet. When you consider other factors such as lower airport handling fees, smoother pilot transition from the A350, and potentially more favorable maintenance costs than the A380 ever managed, it becomes clear that we might be seeing carriers scrambling to have a piece of the aviation engineering marvel by Airbus. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and we will see you on the next one.